Hello, and welcome to the 6G Symposium session on 6G and the quantum internet. I'm Alex Lawrence from 6G World, and in this session, we're going to be looking at how quantum computing and quantum security is starting to interact with classical systems and set up some ideas and actions for you to take away. This is very much a rapid fire session to seed some key ideas for those of you like me who aren't quantum experts. Happily, I have three experts with me today who can talk us through exactly that. Tommaso Gagliardoni from Godelsky Security, Ian Deakin of ATIS, and Rob Campbell of Capital Technology University. I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves and share some initial thoughts, and then we'll dive into some questions and conversation. Now, please do share your questions in the Q&A box below, and I'll try to pick some out. If we can't get to your questions now, then I will aim to follow up with you offline afterwards. With that having been said, let me hand over to Rob Campbell to get the ball rolling and share some initial thoughts. Rob, I think you're still muted.
All right, thank you, Alex. And really like to thank Alex and 6G for inviting me. It's a great honor to lead off this very interesting and complex subject. A little bit of my background. I'm an ex-Navy guy. I started life as an electronics technician. I went through officer candidate school, became a cryptologist, which we studied both cryptography and studied how to break cryptography and how to build cryptography. From there, I went into the space program, the National Reconnaissance Office space program, and worked space systems engineering from cryptography and communication. Then I went into private sector work for some defense contractors where I worked for the typical names that you hear of, big names in the defense industry. Then I became a professor, a part-time professor at Capital Tech University, teaching cybersecurity, and got my PhD in quantum technology there. And I'm currently a PhD chair of the Quantum Computing Technology Research Program. So that's a little bit about my background and where I come from. I want to talk about 6G, and a lot of people wonder, well, what happened to 5G? Well, 5G is still kind of rolling out, but already there's talk and discussion about 6G because we realize that there's some lessons learned. There's some synergies there that we can grab from the 5G experience that is still ongoing, and we can perhaps develop a better architecture in something we call 6G. 6G is still being defined, but we know that there are certain aspects that we must consider. Number one and foremost is security. And some people say, well, security and privacy, but personally, I don't see the difference. I mean, if my data is not private, I don't see how it's secure. But so I say security is a critical enabler for 6G. And one of the things that is really impacting everyone in the industry is quantum computing. How will quantum computing impact 6G? And where is the state of the art of quantum computing? It's kind of confusing. I know you hear different things on the internet and various journals. Everybody's talking about quantum computing. You have some that are saying that it's very distant. Some are saying that it's here. I'm of the mind it's here. And I'll get into why I say that a little later. But so quantum computing is one of the significant aspects that we must consider for security for 6G. China, 2021, they published a paper where they demonstrated the world's fastest quantum computer, which is a 66 quantum bit computer that's two-dimensional program quantum bits, which means basically it surpasses IBM, surpasses Google. So it's at the moment in the public sector, it's claiming to be the world's fastest quantum computer. So essentially, this is setting off a race, I mean, basically a global race, which has been undergoing for actually decades. Another aspect that's going to impact quantum computing, especially here in the US and those who are involved and follow NIST as far as their standards. I've been working with following NIST standards when it comes to quantum computing algorithms that may defend against quantum computing attacks for a number of years. So where NIST is right now, we've had 3 rounds essentially where there are 3 submissions, international submissions, algorithms in which these algorithms are tested and verified, validated to be quantum resistant. And I use that term specifically, resistant. So we're on the edge of NIST releasing standards, draft standards next year. And that time frame goes from 2022 to 2023. Now, this is a huge impact to the entire industry because it's not well understood how these algorithms will impact the industry. They're very complex algorithms that we've never seen before. They were not designed for the hardware processors that we have today. So there are lots of complexities involved to make this work. The third item is our PKI, public key infrastructure. If you think about our public key infrastructure, it started like in the 70s. And essentially, it was never designed to be a public key infrastructure like it is today, which the internet and everything uses it. So it was a hodgepodge of cryptography that was patched together, put together. And then when the internet came and they said, oh, that's a great way to secure the internet, a great way to secure documents, a great way to secure communication. It was never designed to do that from the beginning. So it was basically a hodgepodge of technologies that are outdated, old, they don't work well together, and we have many flaws that are vulnerable without a quantum computer. You hear about these attacks, solar winds, and they go on and on. There are many you don't hear about. So it has great vulnerabilities, and it really we need to take a look at public key infrastructure and how we do business. The fourth aspect is, as I mentioned, these algorithms that NIST is about to standardize, they are nothing like we've worked with before. I published papers on these algorithms. I personally ran tests, verified on different platforms, and they're nothing like what we have. And so it's a massive undertaking. In fact, it's the most complex migration of cryptography in history. And I don't think everybody understands that because it has a lot of parts. We have a lot of specialists today who understand one part, but they don't understand the other part, and so on, so on. So I think these are all things we have to consider when we talk about a security enabler for 6G. And the last point here on this slide is we're moving away from large platforms, desktop, mainframe, all of that. Everything is the IoT devices, the low power devices, everything from your thermostat, your refrigerator, controls, heat, everything is moving to the internet, and it's low power, and it is connected. So 6G will have to consider how will it help to secure these devices. Now, when you talk about the cryptography that's NIST about to standardize, I mean, these low power devices cannot handle, they don't have the processing power by definition. They're low power, low processing capability. So how do we handle that? So these are significant points that I see as far as 6G and when it comes to quantum computing. and security. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's one aspect I didn't really discuss, and it's not really discussed very much, and for good reason. And we're talking about the state of quantum computing, where it is today. And so essentially, for most people in the public, what they know about the state of the art of quantum computing is what they read on the internet, what they may read in Nature or some quantum computing journal. And that is unclassified. That is public knowledge. That's public information. Now, what we don't talk about, again, but we have to consider, and we would be naive not to consider that nation states around the world have been working on quantum computers for decades. So what we see, what we hear on the news, on the internet, that's just public. That's just public sector state where we are for the public. You must know that if nation states realize the potential in terms of being able to hack into the vital secrets of another nation, or being able to hack into the intellectual property, which is really, really as important these days, intellectual property, and whether or not you're talking about state secrets, that can't be overstated how important that is. So it has to be one of the highest priorities of any nation who's looking to survive into the next century. So you must assume that lots of
Excellent.
money.
Sorry to jump in there, Rob. Those are some really good points. We are quite tight on time, so there's a lot there to return to. But if you don't mind, I'd just like to hand over to Ian Deakin from ATIS to get some of his points across, and then we can come back to that if you're okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Ian Deakin. I'm a principal technologist at ATIS, and for those that are not really familiar with ATIS, we're a standards development organization. We're accredited by the American Standards Institute, and we represent the North American organization as a partner for 3GPP. But I'm working really in the ATIS innovation agenda and strategic initiatives, which focuses on emerging technology and the potential for that emerging technology to disrupt the ICT industry. It can create new business opportunities, solve common industry challenges, and creating new platform collaborations. And these initiatives cover things like cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, identity privacy, distributed ledger technology, non-terrestrial networks, and just recently quantum. So in May of this year, we launched an initiative called the Quantum Safe Communications and Information Initiative, and that was really to examine not only the potential threat, as you've heard, from quantum computers on current cryptography, but also, what's the need for quantum resistant security stacks, and that might be even evolutions of the new cryptographic algorithms coming out of NIST, but also the possibility of using new quantum technologies to further enhance security of infrastructure, communications, and information. And primarily, really, the scope of that was to look at how we can create an awareness across our member organizations to be aware of this potential threat and what the changing landscape of security is going to look like in this, if we want to call it, post-quantum world, really, and identify key areas that are going to be impacted within the ICT industry, and as it relates to not 6G, but even 5G and any internet infrastructure as it exists today, and really, how that would actually, I suppose, help and add value really for our members across, not only providing that awareness, but how they can collaborate as member organizations to actually drive in a roadmap of change that needs to happen really from all of this new technology and changes in these security stacks. So really, I suppose the main potential focus area is going to be around, the impact of the communications infrastructure, the applications and the data, and some of those stacks that maybe are under the control of ATIS themselves. So for those that may be aware, we're heavily involved in what's called the Shaken standard that secures IP telephony, and obviously that's built on actually a PKI infrastructure, as Robert just mentioned. So that's going to have an impact, and it will need to transition at some part in the future. So as a starting point, really, our initial objective is really creating this awareness across our members that they know about what the implications of quantum is going to be onto their communications infrastructure and what needs to be done, and the timelines that was just mentioned really before. And I think as it comes to timelines, actually an interesting sort of survey that was commissioned by the Global Risk Institute was across 22 quantum experts really, and analyzing the likelihood of where in the timeline the significant threat from a quantum public cryptography would come from in the future. And they identified 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And across those surveyed, actually the threshold was really around 15 years, that over 50% thought that, that this was going to be a threat. So that's looking at, right, I suppose experts across the industry looking at, when was the potential theoretical timeline that, this is going to be impacted. So if we look at 6G, I suppose the telecom industry today is used to working in these 10-year cycles of, from 5G to 3G to 5G, 4G, 5G, and 6G. So we're in this sort of 10-year cycle now in defining 6G. So I think that, that kind of fits within that timeline that, change will need to happen. We need to be prepared for that change. And I think that, 6G has the opportunity to have, a security by design in terms of considerations for the threat from these quantum technologies and how quantum resistant stacks need to be implemented going forward.
Excellent. Thanks ever so much, Ian. And last but by no means least, Tommaso Gagliardoni, would you like to share some of your observations with us?
Thank you very much, Alex. I think I will just keep my introduction short. You can Google me, you can contact me on LinkedIn or by email. You're very welcome to do it. I will just say that I come more from the science background. So I am a mathematician and cryptographer. I am currently driving the quantum initiative at Swiss American cybersecurity, Kudelski Security. And my area of expertise is really quantum security. So really the intersection between quantum computing and cybersecurity, in particular cryptography. So from my perspective, what I am interested in is to try to understand how we can prepare for the quantum era with an eye on cybersecurity. What's going to change? What we have to be prepared for. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion here at the 6G World. In preparation for this, I sketched a topic map that maybe we can, thank you very much. So, because something that I've seen with my eyes very often when discussing complex topics like this is that there is very often some misunderstandings about what we are talking about, where is the technology and so on. It's a very complex topic. So as a recap, quantum computers, I mean, Rob gave a great introduction on the state of the art. From the practical point of view, I think we have to distinguish between two sides of the consequences of quantum computing. On one side, there is civilian applications, so quantum computers seen as an enabler of civilian applications that are not feasible today. Certain computations in the areas of chemistry, optimization, logistics are too expensive to perform nowadays. And on the other side, security applications. So the fact that quantum computers can be used to break many existing cyber cryptography schemes that protect the cybersecurity of our systems. So quantum computers on one side as an opportunity, on one side as a threat. Regarding the threat, that is where the quantum security discussion comes into play, we have to remember that there's two possible defenses. One is the quantum resistant cryptography, sometimes called post-quantum, quantum safe, whatever, which are cryptographic schemes that are purely classical and can run on today's computer and are being standardized right now. Again, there is this ongoing standardization process by NIST. On the other side, there is quantum cryptography that is using quantum effects in a defensive way. And this goes in two broad areas that sometimes are confused. One is quantum key distribution, which exists today. It's a little bit of a niche technology. You can buy it, you can deploy it. It only has certain uses. On the other side, there is cryptographic quantum protocols. That is where the quantum internet becomes interesting, although it is more with a future outlook. Because here the idea is when quantum computers are going to start becoming mainstream, the next consequence is that we want to connect them in a network. And if you want to connect them in a network, you have to come up with a new bunch of solutions in terms of securing data, securing the communications, and the quantum data exchanged therein. So given all this landscape that we have, the question that we want to look at is, what about 6G? What can we do to integrate some of these opportunities into the 6G technology, and how to mitigate some of the threat before they manifest? And this concludes my introduction, and maybe we can leave it to the audience.
Excellent. Thanks, Tommaso. That was a great introduction. And I'd like to pick up on some of what you've all been saying here around the timeline. You know, you mentioned, Rob, that we may already have quantum computing and breaking quantum cryptography in some very specific nation-state environments. Tommaso, you've given us a sort of good overview there. But what elements of quantum computing and quantum security can we expect to see emerging during the 2020s? If we're having these standards for quantum safe computing being developed in the next couple of years, will we be able to move past them, do you think, during the 2020s? Or you know, what would your anticipation be? And I'll hand this first off to you, Tommaso, since you've given us that overview.
Sure. It's a complex question. The main well, let's call it a challenge with quantum resistant cryptography is that, unlike classical cryptography, where you can clearly define that there is a scheme better than another scheme because maybe the key size is smaller, because it's faster, in the realm of quantum resistant cryptography, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. The mathematics behind the scheme is extremely complicated. The schemes that are being standardized are really diverse. Some of them are very fast but have huge keys. Others have small keys but large ciphertext. So, which means that I think a major issue, a major challenge in the transition to a quantum resistant world during the 2020s is going to be analyzing and deciding for every specific use case the best strategy to secure the particular technology. I'll give you an example, Bitcoin. Right now, you cannot just take any quantum resistant scheme and plug it into the Bitcoin technology to make it quantum secure. It wouldn't work. You have to do some research and choose the right option for this specific use.
That's a very good point.
If I could
Thank you.
add on to that, Alex. Yeah. So I see that there is the complexity of the PKI system, public key infrastructure, that's not well understood. And I'll give you a good example. I've been working this problem diligently for the last year or two. Some of the algorithms that are coming, we will have to take a hybrid approach, meaning half classical, half quantum resistant, right? So we have, you know, perhaps the public key, which is used the most and exposed the most, would be the stronger key, and therefore that would be the quantum resistant key. And the private key or the secret key would remain classical because that's hidden and is not exposed most. So just having said that, there are significant changes that we have to make to our networks to be able to accommodate a classical and a hybrid post-quantum system. That is one of the least things that we can do is to do a hybrid system. Now, some are looking at going totally post-quantum, which means bypassing the current PKI structure as it is. But bottom line, it's very complicated and not well understood because there are many parts that need to be tested and integrated.
Right. Thanks, Rob.
And I think maybe just to follow on from what Tommaso said, sorry, Alex, yeah, that I think that, you know, from an understanding point of view is it's understanding, as he says, that it's not going to be one size fits all, and actually doing an assessment of the crypto agility of the application and the crypto stack that is actually supporting it to understand how agile it will be to transition going forward. And what I mean by that is, can the protocol be supported on a particular device for the particular application in a different way, or can it be modified and in an inexpensive way quite easily? And doing that assessment will mean that we'll be able to map across, you know, how complex it's going to be to transition to make these applications secure in the future. So I don't think it is going to be just a simple plug and play to replace a new algorithm with an old algorithm. I think each application will need to be analyzed to understand, can it be transitioned in an easy way, really, both from a complexity, cost, and probably even, as Robert said earlier, you know, some IoT devices just won't have the processing power to be able to do some of the compute required to support some of these new algorithms as well.
Yeah. Picking up on some of these questions around the complexity and the advanced devices, we've had a question in from Ravi Sinha asking about the adoption of post-quantum cryptography, including with 5G, and asking in particular relating to satellites in this case. And I think earlier this year we heard some reports of initial quantum communications between satellites as a test. So are there opportunities, for example, space-based, which might be ahead of other parts of the network? And I'll pass that over to Tommaso, maybe, since it's been longer since he spoke.
Okay, let me just chime in very quickly. I think 5G has not been, I mean, that's not my ballpark, but I don't think 5G has been designed with quantum technology in mind. I mean, that would be, so for me, the opportunity we have now, I see we also have questions about when quantum computers become mainstream, heterogeneous cloud. I think the opportunity we have with 6G is not to build a quantum internet from scratch. That would be too ambitious. However, laying the foundation for it, you know, making sure that the protocols can be interoperable and can also support maybe quantum key exchange through satellite connection. that is an option that we have right now.
Excellent, thank you. I'm aware that we're coming up to time in this quick gallop, but if there's one takeaway message or action that you'd like the audience to leave with as a result of this, I'd like to just do a quick round robin and get your thoughts on what we should do. Ian, we can perhaps start with you there.
Yeah, I think the main thing is really that organizations need to start making themselves aware of what this pending threat is, and that there's going to be a changing landscape in the security stacks as they are today, and really plan for that. The earlier you can plan for it, the more time you'll have to actually adapt and change. And I think that the good thing as it relates to 6G, as we say, is that we're in this kind of, if we call it 10-year cycle, that we actually have the ability to actually design 6G in a way that it can actually accommodate not just the post-quantum cryptography stacks, but also take advantage of the new capabilities of quantum technologies that we're seeing coming out of labs now.
Excellent, thanks. Tommaso, your thoughts?
I totally agree, totally agree.
Brilliant. And Rob, just your last thoughts of what the audience should be taking away from this now to
yes. I think there are lots of opportunities out there. We have technology such as blockchain, which we're using quite effectively in a lot of areas, especially when it comes to wireless communication. We have IoT blockchains, which has promising technologies in the way that it uses cryptography that makes it resistant to, in some respects, resistant to quantum computers. Also, we need to consider new technologies as we look at the architecture for 6G. We want to consider the way that which we transmit, information. We have technologies that date back 100 years, scalar technology, which bypasses a lot of the issues that current 5G, 4G, and short-range communications have. So these are, these are reachable. Again, Tesla had a patent for this 100 years ago. So I think that there's lots of opportunities. We're going to need a workforce that not are just specialists, and I think that's part of the problem, where they develop something in a vacuum and they don't really understand how it impacts the rest of the system. So we need people who have a holistic view of the system that to be effective. So I think those are my points.
Excellent, thanks, Rob. So we're coming up to time now. I'd like to thank Ian, Rob, and Tommaso for their time and their insights. I know we've only just skimmed the surface of this. And I'd also like to thank you, the audience, for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this and that you'll also explore the other sessions coming up. With that, goodbye and thank you.